Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and it is time, once again, for another Shelf of Many Things, where I take a look at indie and small press tabletop role-playing games. This time I'll be going through Broken Shores from Blackoath Enertainment, who were kind enough to send me a review copy. Broken Shores is a dark fantasy, survival-oriented game set in a drowned world suitable for both group and solo play. But before I get into the details, I'd like to take a moment to thank channel sponsor World Anvil. World Anvil is a set of world-building tools for gamers and authors, featuring templates for articles on characters, locations, and legends, the ability to make interactive maps and timelines with the Chronicles system, organizational charts, and even random tables. It comes out of the box with support for over 45 role-playing systems, with homebrew support and more to make it easy to organize, track, and share lore between players and GMs. And all of the same techniques used to flesh out a world for gaming can be used by authors and other creatives who can build out their plots and story events and even monetize their world by offering exclusive access to sections of the lore, articles, and the stories that they write. World Anvil has a few pricing tiers suited for different needs, and right now you can get 40% off of any yearly subscription by using the coupon code RPGCrawler when you sign up with my link. And with that, let's get into things. As always, I'll give a brief overview of the book, a summary, and then a more in-depth rundown of the contents. After this, I'll go over my thoughts and analysis on it. This review will be based on the PDF available through DriveThruRPG. Broken Shores clocks in at about 131 pages with black and red two-color cover, mostly just black line art with red highlights. The interior is a mix of two-column text and full-width tables, interspersed with inline and occasional full-page illustrations. While much of the smaller inline art seems to be well-selected supporting pieces from a variety of artists, the larger and full-page pieces are done in a consistent style similar to the cover art, giving a very cohesive dark fantasy feel throughout. As for the writing itself, the writing style is concise, easily understood, and navigable, which is of great benefit, although due to the nature of the game it relies a lot on various tables, especially further in. Much of the rules support a procedural generation of many aspects of the world, so the ease of access and ease of location of these tables is of critical importance. Whether Broken Shores lives up to that at the end, I'll address in my conclusion and analysis later. For now, let's briefly go over the contents themselves. The rules are divided into several major sections. The basics give a brief overview of just what the game is and its setting. The characters section covers character creation and advancement. The rules go into the core rules of the game, and then a section on GM-less rules and tools allows for solo play or even group play with no main GM. The section on sorcery details the magical system and the various spells, as well as some magical items. Exploring the 1C details the various factions and whether to be found, as well as procedural generation of ocean areas, ruins, and derelicts, and so forth. Looting the 1C goes into the currency, trade, gear, and other equipment. The final main section into beasts, demons, and other threats, which details various creatures and NPCs one can generate for play. The book concludes with several play sheets to allow for mapping, notes, and character sheets. In more detail, the basics begins with just what Broken Shores is, a percentage-based RPG set in a flooded, post-apocalyptic, procedurally generated world. It gives you some basics on how it plays, especially noting how well it does as a solo or a 1 PC and 1 GM style game, and then goes over the main features, not only of the game, but of the world in general. It's meant to have a dark, brutal tone with dangerous magic, featuring a hunt for the god shards, which are fragments of long-destroyed gods, as well as an open-world style hex crawl and customizable play. The characters section begins with a quick introduction on the idea of a player character in general, which in this game are called drifters, since they drift on the open ocean with very little to their name at first. Attributes are then described. Broken Shores uses a sort of hybrid system, borrowing the 6 familiar scores of strength, dexterity, constitution, will, intelligence, and charisma, but generating them with 3d6 rolls each, then diverting into a percentile-based system from there. Attribute rolls in-game, when called for, are rolled against 5 times a particular attribute score. The different types of basic attribute rolls and situations that calls for them are then touched on in brief. Secondary attributes are then covered. Hit points are fairly typical, governing how much damage a character can take and is derived from a multiple of constitution. Power points are used to cast spells that are derived from will. Speed tells how a character can move, and is derived in various ways from multiples of dexterity. The skills are then covered with a brief introduction on skill checks and the idea that their initial scores are derived from a character's basic attributes. A character is given a set number of skills to raise by certain points, and then the skills themselves are covered, each given a name, an associated attribute, and a brief description. These skills range from social, mobility, and utility skills to combat skills, and so on. Talents are then gone over, with each character able to select 2 to start with. Talents are generally a situational bonus or special ability, a number which modify combat or survival procedures, but which can also be more utility-oriented. The character section then goes over a series of tables with what your character starts as, basically a newly escaped prisoner. These tables give useful hints on the character's background, but some entries may adjust their starting skills, equipment, or starting attributes. After some very basic finishing touches, the characters chapter then goes on to cover character advancement. Rather than a level-based system, Broken Shores allows skills to improve with use, giving a system for tallying potential gains, which may eventually lead to raising attributes. This vaguely reminds me of the Elder Scrolls series of computer RPGs, although I am certain there are a number of percentile-based systems that use something similar. If your attributes raise, you can gain a talent at the same time, making for increased abilities. The Rules chapter starts with a description of the basic mechanics of Broken Shores, which is fundamentally just a percentile roll against the relevant attribute or skill, with a difficulty modifier to adjust the percentage chance of success, randomized when you're not certain of, or when generating a procedurally generated difficulty. There's rules for opposed checks, as well as for critical successes and fumbles as well. The combat rules are explained next, and rather than some sort of opposed check, an attack functions with a series of basic skill checks. A weapon skill check follows by a dodge or a parry check. A table for basic combat procedure sums things up pretty well, with surprise determined, followed by positioning. Initiative is determined at the start, and then play proceeds in that initiative order in subsequent rounds. Each segment of the combat is then described more fully. Rounds are about 10 seconds in length in Broken Shores. Surprise is either situational or based on stealth and perception, and initiative is a die roll modified by dexterity rather than a percentile dice. Each character's turn in combat allows for movement, then one action. An action can be selected from a number of options, including an attack, some sort of combat maneuver, which itself has a number of sub-options, from tripping to disarming to grappling and more. Other actions can be spells, disengaging so as to retreat, a general other catch-all that can include things like using items and so forth. There's brief rules for dual wielding, as well as certain things like attacking an unconscious target, underwater combat, and resistances and vulnerabilities. General rules for armor are given, although specific types are covered later. Broken Shores treats armor as mitigation rather than avoidance, reducing damage received, and armor has an integrity dice chain when that happens, similar to a usage dice chain that you might see in other systems. In fact, you'll see a couple systems in here that use that sort of usage dice thing to govern how things go. Basically, armor degrades over time after taking damage. Shields aren't treated as mitigation, but rather as weapons that can be used to parry without too much penalty, and in fact may improve a base parrying chance based on the shield type. An optional major wounds rule is offered and gives a chance of receiving a long-lasting penalty when a character suffers massive damage, which dovetails nicely with the survival focus of the game. Likewise, critical hits and fumbles are covered, each with their own table with different effects in combat, and are divided into the types of damage or attack, at least for the critical parts. The fumble table is just a single table. Rules for healing and death are here, with characters healing a flat amount each day, while the medicine skill not only is able to speed that, but may also be used to treat bleeding, serious wounds, and so forth. Broken Shores offers an after-combat resolution table to determine whether somebody actually died or whatever when they drop to 0, with possibilities including immediate death, the need for medical attention for recovery, the need for extended bed rest, or even quick recovery. There's even a possibility for permanent wounds, which may impact a character's ability to survive long-term. A variety of conditions are described along with their effects. These conditions can be inflicted through attacks, accident, or just circumstance, and may indeed include scurvy, an ever-present threat when dealing with long-term sea travel, and limited food sources. Fatigue is also covered, since the survival focus of the setting can make it a much more important effect. Similarly to 5th edition, fatigue has a number of levels, each with their own penalty, which can eventually result in death as they stack up. Rules for timers are given, which is another important use of a kind of usage die thing. Rather than a flat real-world timekeeping or measuring everything in rounds, the usage die chain, similar to, used for armor or other expendables, can make for a more tense, less predictable way of keeping track of something with time pressure on it. This can range from collapsing buildings to sinking boats to whatever is needed at that time. Basic crafting rules are given, which allow you to construct a number of objects, seeing as the setting does rely on scrounging up materials and managing resources. Sailing rules are given, along with the results of fumbles, since it's such a big part of the game, along with guidance for what happens when someone is lost at sea without any sort of vessel. The rules for vessels themselves go over damage, what happens when they catch on fire, and so forth, but also cover the random generation of vessels, as well as rules for your raft, which can be as important, if not more so, than your main character. It's such a critical part of your survival, and you can eventually improve it over time. With its ability to be played solo, the GM-less Rules and Tools chapter offers a variety of important options for the game, many of which take the form of tables. It starts off with a basic oracle system to answer yes or no questions for plot points, NPC decisions, and more. This includes an option for rarer occurrences, as well as the introduction of complications for more complex questions. There is a section of action and theme tables for general inspiration on events, then a sort of creature combat AI given just to run an enemy's actions in combat. This is followed by a general NPC reaction table for various initial dispositions, some unintroduced tables for fleshing out what happens with various NPC details are here as well to fill things in like motivation, what they're doing, and so forth. The sorcery chapter covers the basic magic system in Broken Shores and starts with an introduction to magic in the setting. Magic is dangerous in this game, even for a specialized character, and this all stems from the fact that the god in charge of magic is kinda dead, like most of the others. Spellcasting requires not only an expenditure of power points, but also things like a tenacity check just to make sure you can even cast in the first place, and only then can a spell effect check be made to see if the skill was enough to actually manifest something at all. The spell effect table is mostly a negative effect, to be quite honest. So without a major bonus to spellcasting, it's highly likely that even trying to cast any spell is bad news. With that said, each character may know some spells, and each spell the character may know has or may have idiosyncrasies to its casting, just as they learned it. These are randomly determined and take effect any time the character casts that spell, regardless of their ability. Rules for recovering power points are here as well as for learning the new spells themselves, with limitations on how many a character can know at any time. The character can keep spells written down, so if they reach the limit on what they know, they can forget a spell momentarily to take up another one, and as long as they have it written down somewhere, they can always relearn it later. Memorizing a spell in this way does take some time and effect, though, so, it's something to keep in mind. The spells themselves are then covered. There are 20 spells in all, and they're mostly utility spells. Each is listed with a name, PowerPoint cost, range, whether it can be resisted, a duration, and then a paragraph or so of description. The God Shards are covered here as well, being a major part of the magic of the land. God Shards are basically fragments of divinity scattered over the world. Minor God Shards are the more common and less specialized, while major God Shards are much rarer, and each represents a portion of a specific deity. With any mortal that finds one may only attune to one of the major ones at a time. Once absorbed, they may be empowered with elemental essences that you also find scattered through the world. Empowering a God Shard in this way unlocks various abilities, but also grants bonuses based on the type of element the essence comes from. Each of the major God Shards is listed thereafter, each one tied to a particular dead god. They have a passive ability and 4 active abilities. The active abilities are similar to spells, at least most of the time, and with that they require power points, have a cost, range, resistance, duration, and a description of what they can do. Unlike sorceries, they aren't subject to as dramatic a failure chance when they're used, so may in fact be more useful. Exploring the 1C gives more details on the setting itself. It starts with the background on the death of the gods and the way that the war ended up flooding the world and drowning out all the land. At the current point in the setting, islands are just now beginning to peak up above the waves again, with various shards of the broken gods starting to turn up, scattered throughout the world. The cults are then given details as well, with many of the dead gods and one remaining live one, each having their own group of followers who have their own ways and goals, much of the time rather extreme. Some other factions are detailed as well, ranging from the remnants of old kingdoms to groups of bandits and wanderers. After some general details on the one sea that spans the world in general, there's some optional rules for determining temperature and weather, as well as some more important rules regarding wind strength, which can impact how quickly a raft can move around the world. The exploration procedures are laid out next, with the ocean being a hex crawl with the contents of each hex determined as you unlock them. Ocean encounter tables are given information on things that you can find in the open sea, as some of them can open up entirely new sub-exploration systems, such as coming across a derelict, ruin, or an island. A table on demonic corruption is in here as well, and the exploration itself can expose a character to demonic energies in a number of ways, as can magic use. It's useful further on as well, since this exposure can crop up just often, just again and again. A table on complications can list various things that can go wrong in several of the encounters or events already gone over, and a more specific faction or creature set of encounter tables offers more combat, less event-driven encounters that you can come across. There's rules for derelict generation, essentially producing floating ships that can be explored like a miniature dungeon crawl with rooms generated on the fly. The system isn't terribly complex, but can be used to quickly map out various derelicts in the abstract, with the size giving a limit on how many rooms are in the vessel. This includes the possibility of encountering inhabitants, finding various loot and supplies, and more. The system of island exploration is a little bit more complex, and this differs in that it has the ability to create like a hex crawl within a hex crawl, with a need to return to a base camp at the end of each day or suffer complications. Islands can be much larger and take longer to explore, but don't have the risk of sinking, or at least most of the time they don't. This requires camping rules and touches on the ability to encounter settlements. Tables are given for encounters, various landmarks, hazards, and more. So, the next major system of exploration is a ruin exploration, which cleave more closely to the derelict exploration rules, being of similar quality, but this time covering strange old buildings found either on islands or rising up from the depths of the sea itself. These ruins may have various original purposes, weird peculiarities, and may feature more exotic features for each room compared to other exploration types, being as that they're very ancient ruins. There's some tables for various aspects of room descriptions, as well as a set of ruin events that can happen during exploration. Rules for searching a room can differ, offering options on what you find in various places. There's a section after them on general settlements as well. Now, settlement generation is a little bit more abstract, just giving ways to generate names, the overall industry, the overall attitude, government, trades, and so forth. This can include rough plot leads, tasks, and encounters, so you can branch off from there if you absolutely want to. Special rules for making enemies and allies round out the chapter. Now, this is not necessarily for individual encounters or individual persons, but rather for when you anger an entire faction in the case of making enemies, or manage to befriend a settlement or a faction. There's a chance that an ally may come along if you're in trouble if you have enough of them. So at that point, once you've got a few settlements under your belt, you can have a chance of not dying when you get lost at sea, things like that. Looting the one sea covers equipment, gear, and even currency. It starts with an explanation of the currency, which is abstracted. Value is measured just in miscellaneous metal coins of various types, although it may also be measured in fresh water and shards, the minor god shards that can be expended to boost spells and other effects. There's a general conversion rate between these three incredibly valuable resources. Encumbrance rules are given here and follow an item-based abstracted sort of guideline based on strength. The basic usage die chain is explained here as well, as Broken Shore uses this to track expendables or equipment wastage in general. Tables to define random traders are given, since one never knows what types of traders can be encountered at sea or even in a settlement. Weapon tables offer weapon stats by name, cost, the damage and the damage type, whether they can be used to parry, what sort of weight the weapon has, as well as any special traits like two-handed, versatile, and so forth. Range is given for ranged weapons when they occur, and some things like ammunition and throwable weapons are given costs in usage dice. After the basic weapon table, a few tables are following to generate random weapons and armor for salvage and merchant inventory and the like, as well as descriptions of the various weapon traits listed in the tables before. Armor tables list each armor type with its cost, protection weight, and its maximum integrity die, and so forth, as well as any other notes for that particular armor type. Shields are listed similarly, except for the shields have a parry bonus rather than a protection rating. Now this rolls right into the general equipment tables, where equipment is listed by name, cost, weight category it is, as well as any special notes. Tables for loot generation that cover different categories of loot one can find are here. There's a mundane loot table, a valuable loot table, and then a precious loot table. A precious few of these items given in the high-end tables can be magical, or at least have unusual powers. Things such as potions and seed rules follow, as their effects are listed in various tables, and there are a few general magic items as well in the form of artifacts. While minor items might offer only basic flat benefits, the artifacts must be attuned, have several effects each, and may have a paragraph or more of description or special rules. There are 10 types listed, but you can probably make more of these in a game. The final chapter of Broken Shores is Beasts, Demons, and Other Threats. Not just a bestiary, the chapter starts with guidelines for determining an encounter's difficulty, which can include modifications to the stats and loot offered by a creature. There's also some brief rules on harvesting animals. The creatures are then listed in turn. Each one has a name, a type, a loot chance, basic stats for the 6 attributes, hit points and armor, number appearing, attacks and weapons, combat and detection skill rates, whether they can parry, any special attacks the creature may have, and a brief description. There are a number of different types of creatures, with some, like demons, having larger tables of abilities and attacks. The book closes out with a bit of an index, as the various charts, character sheets, and exploration sheets have been moved to their own booklet. So, what do I think about Broken Shores? This time, there's 3 elements I want to cover: the presentation, the world, and the rules themselves. From a presentation point of view, it's easily navigable and understandable, with the same concise writing that I've come to expect from Blackoath. The artwork is a mix of well-selected to very excellent and evocative custom pieces, especially those few full-page pieces that provide a consistent view of the concepts of the world involved. I will note that there were a few places in the rules where things were mentioned but not clarified immediately, although once I was finished reading through the book, those elements usually fell into place for the most part. I like to think that certain things like the absorption of elemental motes to unlock god shards could be explained a little bit better, but that's just 1 or 2 nitpicks in an otherwise very well written and comprehensive soloable rule set. The world is an interesting one, just that it takes the dark fantasy post-magical apocalypse style of play, which usually brings with it images of desert wastelands, and instead applies it to a nautical setting. This preserves certain elements of survival, the need for food and fresh water, but also adds a twist to the threats. The ocean, after all, can be unpredictable and quickly shifting hostile terrain, every bit as deadly, if not more so, than a blasted desert. I couldn't help but think of the old Costner movie Waterworld while flipping through it in terms of upgrading your raft and encountering the various floating derelicts. In a way, I feel like it gives Broken Shores more of a sense of fanciful wonder and hope than if it had just been another blasted desert world. Sure, it's dark fantasy, it's a world where most of the gods have been destroyed, but the islands are once more rising from the deep, settlements are beginning to form, providing a hope for the future. And of course, even the god shards themselves might hint at an eventual resurrection or recreation of certain gods, or simply the ascension of others. And honestly, I kind of like that. It feels a bit fresh for the genre, rather than just covering a simply dying world. You're facing one with the opportunity. As far as the system itself goes, I found the combination of the classic 6-style attributes for the persona-based system a bit odd at first, but it certainly seems to work, especially once you get used to it. Combat does seem a bit less streamlined than it might be in your D20 system, and I could see how a combat between characters with very high parry ratings could go on for a little bit more than is absolutely acceptable. But generally, it moves along well enough, and some variety and adaptivity is built into the system. I also really like the use of dice chains to track more than just usage dice. It not only provides a strong sense of internal consistency, which I love in any game where it appears, but also gives methods to generate ruins in other places on the fly without necessarily knowing exactly how big that particular location is going to be. I find that this works very well in terms of maintaining tension in a solo game. I have played other solo games where you can generate dungeons on the fly, and there's always a challenge in limiting the overall size of a location without giving away to the solo player exactly how extensive the ruins are. As you explore a place, and by extension generate it, as a player you want to keep an eye on your resources so you know how you might want to be able to retreat and exit, or especially if an event happens that requires a quick exit. If you know exactly how many rooms are going to be generated, or even a general amount of them, the size of a piece of paper can be used to limit a map in some systems and so forth, then you have an advantage in terms of knowing how far you can press your luck. By using the methods described in Broken Shores, the knowledge of exactly how big a ruin or derelict can be is limited in probability, which results in a softer sort of idea of how large a place can be, thus ramping up the tension. You know generally how big it can be without having an exact kind of notice. About the only real issue I have is more of a feature of the setting than a general critique, and has to do with how difficult magic can be to cast. I am very used to, of course, the whole dangerous and unpredictable sorcery style play, but with Broken Shores, unless you are incredibly specialized and or willing to use certain smaller god shards to cast every time, you have a very small chance of actually getting any spell done when you need it. In terms of the setting, this is absolutely fitting. In terms of my actual personal preference on gameplay, it does kind of limit my desire to even attempt a spellcasting character. That's probably just a problem with me, though, so take that as it will. Broken Shores is worth a look if you're into solo play, especially if you're into something different than the post-apocalyptic dark fantasy style genre that, you're looking for variety while still maintaining that genre. It maintains the same tropes without being a carbon copy, plays very well, although the world isn't really incredibly detailed. It is detailed enough. The system of skills, percentile checks, and such is definitely serviceable, but the real gem of Broken Shores, I think, is in the Ruin, Island, and Derelict generation rules. I would personally love to see something like it made and tweaked for a general fantasy style of RPG. All said, Blackoath has come up with a concise, unique product that is eminently playable and of decent quality. If you're into solo play, I do invite you to look it up, or any number of other offerings from Blackoath, since they do have several nice rules-light RPGs for various settings now. In fact, I've got a couple that I need to review. This one, due to my scheduling, has been on the books so long that it's actually undergone a name change. Some of you might have heard me talking about the God Shards review coming up. They had to change it due to various issues, so it's now called Broken Shores. Anyway, this one's finally up. I'll take a look at more. Hopefully I'll get some more reviews out in general. For now, this has been the RPG Crawler with my look at Broken Shores. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. I will put a link to where you can get it below, of course. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you are still watching, I would like to take the opportunity to thank my supporters, the top tiers of which are listed on the screen, without whose support I would not have been able to offer the variety of content that I have on this channel throughout the years. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to join them, you can support the channel. There are a variety of options to do so. I have a Patreon, a Subscribestar, as well as channel memberships enabled. If you are not in a position to contribute, simply leaving a like, a comment, or sharing my videos are all wonderful ways to help the channel grow without spending a dime, and are all greatly appreciated.